call Honi Harawera.
Kia ora tātou katoa e te whare. Mr Speaker, the end of the government's financial year sits uncomfortably close to Te Matariki. The dawning of the Māori New Year and a time to reflect on the past and to look to the future. And the essence of this bill, education, is as critical to our past and as central to our future as anything else which might arise over the next century. Just over 100 years ago, Mr Speaker, at the Māori Congress in 1908, Hone Heke Ngāpua, Māori Party MP for Tai Tokerau, argued for the teaching of Māori in native schools and for Māori to be recognised as a subject for university entrance. 80 years later, the Matawai Declaration called for the establishment of a fully autonomous and independent Māori Education Authority to secure Māori control over Māori philosophies and educational practices. And just 9 years ago, Tū Wharetoa Chief Tumu Te Heuheu called the Hui Taumata Mātauranga to bring together proposals for a separate Tinoranga Tiratanga Māori Education Authority, a new Māori Education Act, and a Minister of Māori Education. Central to all of these themes is our desire to give our kids a good start in life. Mr Mallard, open your ears. At no time did I say he approved it. I just said it was to bring together proposals. So if you just keep your mouth shut, keep your ears open, you might hear and you might understand. And give them a range of options for their future within an environment where schools engage with whānau to develop models of success and innovation. And to ensure Māori needs are genuinely met, we want to see more Māori language teachers in all schools as well. So this bill raised a few hopes given its targeting early childhood, secondary, tertiary programs, private schools and international students. But the reality is that every year the Ngā Haiata Mātauranga annual report on Māori education says most schools are still struggling to meet the educational needs of Māori students. The first proposal in this bill is about early education. That's okay, because 76% of all Māori kids are in mainstream early education centres. Now, a few weeks back, the ERO report, Success for Māori Children in Early Childhood Services, noted that only a third of services were helping Māori children to achieve. In other words, two-thirds simply did not have effective processes in place to help Māori kids grow or even to identify whether what they were doing for Māori kids was any good or not. So I was disappointed to note that the proposal in this bill was focused more on care arrangements in shopping malls and gyms than on education. We're okay, Mr Speaker, with exempting these short-stop centres from full licensing standards as long as they still meet all the health and safety standards and have proper management in place. But it's hardly the changes we were looking for to help Māori children to learn. The second proposal, to provide more opportunities for secondary school students to spend time learning in a tertiary environment or in the workplace, is a great idea, and one that many wharekura in secondary schools are already embracing. In fact, there was a feature story in the 0708 Ngā Haiata Mātauranga on a Ngāpuhi boy, Sam Henare, who was head boy of Aotearoa College out in Porirua and also involved in the youth apprenticeship scheme. According to Sam, the scheme gave him the real-life experience he needed to pursue an electrical apprenticeship, a combination of school, the employer, and the electrical technology and industry organisation. The third proposal about establishing a fit and proper person requirement for managers of private schools. It's okay, making sure they ain't crooked or crocked or bankrupt. Again, hardly a seismic shift in educational thinking. Sure, there's some 1,500 Māori kids in private schools and them and their mates deserve to have decent people looking after them. But private schools are doing pretty well, actually, particularly given the $35 million doled out to them by the government in 2009. And the fourth proposal is to refund course fees for international students who leave their courses before they're completed. Well, good on them, but it doesn't do anything to enhance Māori education. Mr Speaker, the $7 million spent on He Kakano to provide new forms of teaching and learning to lift Māori student achievement is great. And teaching Pākehā teachers that they can get more out of their Māori students if they understand them better through the Kotaitanga program is a great idea as well. But there's a whole heap more we'd like to see too. More commitment to kura kaupapa, like matching the $35 million to private schools in next year's budget, a dedicated and successful Māori language teachers recruitment strategy, the development of curriculum based around local hapu and iwi, more structured and positive engagement with whānau, and strong mentoring programs to increase Māori participation and success in tertiary education, to name just a few areas. Mr. Speaker, this morning I chaired the Māori Affairs Select Committee into the tobacco industry. Two rangatahi spoke to our committee and I invited them to come and sit alongside us during the presentation from Philip Morris, New Zealand. The young man had a wonderful name made famous by the Jim Croce song, Bad Bad Leroy Brown, and he gave a very strong and stirring presentation about the impact of the tobacco industry on him, his parents' generation and his grandparents' generation. And the young woman, Mahinarangi Tori, was also an excellent example of what can be achieved when Māori students are encouraged to believe that their Māoriness really is something special. She was well educated, well presented, well spoken, a beautiful speaker in both English and Māori, and a credit to her school, her whānau, her hapu and her iwi. She is an example of what positive education for Māori can mean, Mr. Speaker. And while we will be supporting this bill, we would have liked to have seen more emphasis on excellence than on logistics. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to close by just telling a little story about an education minister who came to Mangamuka Marae some years ago. When he got up to talk about schools and about Māori education, Māori principals had been there for some hours before he had arrived. And they were all talking really positive. It was a great experience. And then the minister came. And the minister talked about Māori education. He was getting everybody really, really depressed. So I leaned across to this principal and I said, how come he's talking like that? He leaned over to me and said, that's what they call the deficit model. So when I got a chance to talk, I stood up and I said to the minister, please don't ever come to my school. Because we don't operate our school on the deficit model. We operate on the basis that excellence should be normal and that everything we should do should be aiming towards achieving that. Not teaching kids that you are dumb because your parents were dumb. You're probably going to be a thief because some of your cousins might have been a thief. All of that kind of thinking was very destructive kind of thinking. And I was thinking, as I was sitting, I'm not a principal, but my wife was. So I was able to sit in and listen to the kōrero. And how depressing that guy was when it came to talking about Māori education. I sincerely hope we never, ever get a Minister of Education like that again. That minister's name was Trevor Mallard. Kia ora tātou.